Hello, ladies and gentlemen of St. Mary Parish here in Schwenksville, PA. My name is Kevin Kelly. I'm one of the seminarians from St. Charles Seminary, and here to continue the just the reflections I've been doing on the Gospel of John, chapter 6, leading up to the Bread of Life discourse. Today I want to do something a little bit different. I'd like to jump back to the Old Testament. There's a section that's really important to understanding what Jesus is about to do in the next section of the chapter 6. So just as a refresher, first part of John 6, Jesus performed the great miracle, the multiplication of the loaves. Then he sent his disciples away and then walked on the water where he met them, in the midst of the chaos of the storm and the sea. And so before I get into the next portion of, where Jesus gives his discourse, I'm going to talk about specifically Exodus chapter 16. Now, the chapter is somewhat long, so I'm not going to read the chapter. I encourage you, please go and read it yourselves. And there's a lot, some of it may not fully make sense, or maybe you're already familiar with Exodus and Genesis, but I'm just going to go through a little bit of the background and then into Exodus 16 itself. So the setting is, the Israelites have been in Egypt for a number of years, many generations, and they've been enslaved by the Egyptians. The Egyptians have done all sorts of things to try to quell the growth of the Israelites, and the Israelites have only continued to flourish. And in fact, one of them, Moses, is called by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and back to the promised land, the land that was promised to Abraham back in Genesis by God. So after, much strife between God through Moses and the Pharaoh, including the famous 10 plagues that were inflicted the Egyptians, and the climactic scene where we're at the Red Sea, the Israelites are leaving Egypt, the Egyptians are coming out to take them out. God works this mighty miracle where he parts the Red Sea, he leads the Israelites through, and he destroys the Egyptians all in one fell swoop. Exodus 15, the chapter right before where we're going to start, is a beautiful canticle of praise and adoration. I will shout to the Lord, for he is gloriously triumphant. He has saved us from the Egyptians. He is going to take care of us. So you think Exodus 16, the Israelites are going to be pretty happy, right? Wrong. They are upset. You see, after crossing the Red Sea and traveling across the Sinai Peninsula in the book called The Wilderness of Sin, the Israelites realized something. They've just been led into a desert. I don't know if you've ever been to a desert, but they're hot, they're dry, they're very uncomfortable. So I think we can give the Israelites a little bit of slack and suddenly they realize, life's just suddenly got a whole lot more uncomfortable. And so the Israelites, they grumble, they complain. They already think, man, wouldn't it be better if we could go back to Egypt? Wouldn't it be better if we go back to having bread and meat like we had in Egypt? Forgetting the fact that they had been oppressed, forgetting the fact they had been slaves, being forced to build everything for the Egyptians, forgetting the fact that the Egyptians didn't like them, were, oppressing them. They're already thinking, I should just go back. It was better the way it was before. And don't we relate to that? Don't we get to points in our life where why did I do this? This was a bad decision. It was so much easier before, even if it's something good and noble and worthwhile that we've undertaken. Well, God speaks to Moses and tells him, I'm about to work another sign. Now, of course, the Lord has just worked a sign for the Israelites. He just led them through the Red Sea. He just freed them from the Egyptians, but he says, okay, I'm going to work another sign. And more importantly, the Lord knows that he just led them into a desert. This is all part of his plan. See, he's going to help the Israelites learn that they can't rely on earthly things. He's going to have them rely on him. And so the answer, the relief that God is going to give the Israelites, as we read in chapter 16, is not, he's not going to, mysteriously have a caravan show up with all kinds of food for them to eat. He's not going to have any sort of human intervention in this regard. Instead, he tells Moses to direct the people to go outside every morning and every evening. And he promises that I will rain down bread from heaven. Just keep that phrase in the back of your mind for next time, but rain down bread from heaven. And sure enough, the next morning after God gives Moses these instructions, the Israelites go outside, and as if there had just been a big hailstorm or a big snowfall, there are all these white flakes scattered all over the ground. And, in Hebrew, they ask each other, Manhu, Manhu, Manna, what is this? And Moses tells them, this is the manna. This is, just as you have asked, that's what we're going to call it. This is the manna. This is the what is it. It's strange that he doesn't identify the type of food it is. He leaves it a question. What is this food? But the manna becomes the food that the Israelites are to eat throughout what will end up being 40 years in the desert. They don't know that the first time they get the food, but it's this mysterious, marvelous, miraculous food, not wrought by human hands. They don't see, it's like a miracle of nature of some kind. And in fact, not only do they get the bread in the morning, they also have quail that covers the camp in the evening. So just as they're asking for bread and meat, so too, they get the bread in the morning, the meat in the evening. Now, God gives Moses additional instructions about the manna. He warns Moses, now, I need to see whether the Israelites will trust me and be faithful to me, because that's what God is seeking. He wants their trust. He wants their fidelity. He wants them to know that he is their good father who will provide for them, and to have them turn to him and rely on him. So he tells them, don't have the Israelites gather too much food. They should gather only what they need for that day. In other words, the manna will become their daily bread. They aren't going to store up a week's worth of manna or a month's worth of manna. He says anything they store up more than a day's need is going to go bad. So tell them only gather up a day's worth of manna. So the manna has this mysterious property of being a savory, delectable food when eaten at the right time in the right way, but being detrimental if it's kept or not used properly. And he also tells them that the manna is only going to fall 6 days of the week. In preparation for the Sabbath, the seventh day, that's the only day that they're allowed to gather up twice as much manna, one for each of the 2 days. That way no one goes out and gathers manna on the Sabbath. Almost as if the manna has special properties, special preservatives on the Sabbath day, on the Lord's day, the holy day. Now, sure enough, the Israelites go outside, and some of them in their greed gather up more than they need. And what they quickly find is the second day, any manna that they held onto has gone bad. Likewise, some of them, despite the instructions of Moses, go out and they work on the Sabbath. They go to find the manna, expecting to find it. But mysteriously, the manna doesn't appear on the Sabbath. Only the manna that they have ready and waiting for them is there. And Moses tells the people, this is what the Lord has guided. This is not food that you're gathering for yourself. This is not food under your control. This is how the Lord wants to provide for you. You are in the desert. You have no means of obtaining food for yourself. And so this is your time. This is the opportunity to trust the Lord, to let him provide the food for you, and for you, in faithful response to God's generosity, to be obedient, to be trusting, and to know that God has got you covered. Literally covered with the manna, with the quail. So, as I said earlier, this manna ends up feeding them for 40 years. What will happen is, throughout the rest of the book of Exodus, Numbers, as well as in the law codes given in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, it's all in that period where the Israelites are wandering through the desert before they make it to the promised land. And so they're on a journey. There's no time for agriculture, for growing crops. They do have, cattle with them, and so they are able to get some food, some sustenance that way. But really, in this time of the desert, they're called in a mysterious way to rely on the Lord and rely on his providence. Even before we get into how this applies to us today with the Eucharist, which I'll get into next time, to some extent, even just from this, we can draw some lessons of, being called to trust on the Lord and rely on the Lord. There are many things that we can and should be in charge of our lives. Many of you, I'm sure, have jobs, have work that you go out and do. Many of you may have a house to take care of, an apartment, just some place to live. You have to be able to provide for one's needs. And of course, that is one of the joys, one of the beauties of human life is that we are able to take care of ourselves and provide for ourselves. But in this scripture passage, in this book of Exodus, one of the key themes is that we're really not where we belong. We don't belong long-term on earth. It's our home for now, but our true home is in heaven. Just as the Israelites were journeying towards the promised land, we too are on a journey towards heaven. And so on that journey, we need to rely on God. God is the only one who can help us get to where we're going. We can't get to heaven on our own. We need his grace. And God is telling us, I've got you covered, literally covered. I'm going to cover you with my grace. There will be plenty of food for you. But I need you to trust me and every day to come to me, to turn to me and ask me for the graces, for the favors that you need in that day, for the strength that you need to do the day's work. So I encourage you as you hear this story, maybe as you read it yourself and as you reflect on it, do I turn to the Lord for my daily bread? Do I rely on him for what I need, for my needs to be met? And of course, it requires cooperation. God asked the Israelites to go outside and gather the manna. It's not like he told them to open their mouth and just he would dump it in, but it was a cooperation. He would provide the food, they would respond, they would gather the food, and they would take care of their needs accordingly. So again, it's not God is going to just take care of everything, so just close your eyes and wish for everything you need. Keep doing what you're doing. Live faithful to your vocation, but continue to turn to prayer and ask, turn to the Lord. Ask him to provide your needs. Help him. Ask that he'll help you to trust him and rely on him for all of your daily needs, for all of the needs for life, that he may give us the daily bread for the journey as we work towards heaven. Thank you all so much. God bless.